The snow fell gently over the suburban neighborhood of a small town in the United States. It was Christmas Eve, and the Harper family home glowed like a beacon of hope amid the winter darkness. Twinkling lights decorated the modest facade, while inside, the aroma of freshly baked cookies and the sound of Christmas hymns filled the air with a welcoming warmth. Jeremiah, the father of the family, sat on the couch adjusting the golden star he would place atop the Christmas tree. A man of unshakable faith, he was a spiritual leader not only for his family, but also for the small local church where he served as a deacon. Beside him, his wife, Mariah, stood in the kitchen decorating cookies shaped like stars and angels. Despite the exhaustion from long shifts as a nurse, her radiant smile reflected her firm belief that God would always sustain them. In the living room, 10-year-old Jasmine, the eldest child, was thrilled as she carefully hung the last ornaments on the tree. Dressed in a white dress with tiny red bows, she resembled an angel. Beside her, 2-year-old Noah babbled as he tried to reach the lower ornaments with his chubby fingers. However, behind that serene and united scene, a shadow lingered. Jeremiah had lost his job a few months earlier, and although he and Mariah were doing everything they could to keep the bills paid, the weight of financial difficulties threatened to steal the joy of this special night. Adding to their challenges, the family had recently faced discriminatory glances and whispered comments while shopping or walking through the neighborhood. Even so, that night, the family resolved to focus on the true meaning of Christmas, the birth of Jesus. They had planned a home service to give thanks for all they had, especially for being together. Jeremiah glanced at the open Bible on the table and felt peace flood his heart. As the evening progressed, an unexpected knock sounded at the door. Footsteps echoed on the porch, followed by a heavy knock. Jeremiah looked at Mariah, who stopped what she was doing, clearly surprised. Jasmine ran to him, holding his hand. "Daddy, who could it be?" With a cautious expression, Jeremiah walked to the door and slowly opened it. Outside, braving the biting cold, stood a neighbor the family recognized but had never spoken to. The man, an elderly white gentleman with a stern expression, held a wrapped package in his hands, hesitating to speak. "Good evening," he began, his voice tense. Well, I thought it might be nice to bring this over. It's Christmas after all." The family was silent, surprised by the unexpected gesture. Yet, behind the act, there seemed to be more than just an attempt at kindness. Jeremiah accepted the package with a wary but polite smile. He thanked the neighbor, while Jasmine curiously tried to peek at its contents. "Merry Christmas to you too," Jeremiah replied, his voice calm but firm. The neighbor hesitated for a moment, looked into Jeremiah's eyes, and finally said, "I hope this helps. I know things haven't been easy around here." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked back to his house, quickly disappearing into the snowy darkness of the yard. Jeremiah closed the door, glanced at Mariah, who had come closer, and placed the package on the living room table. Inside the wrapping, they found groceries and an envelope. Upon opening it, they discovered a simple card with a handwritten note. "Please forgive me. May God bless you this Christmas." Mariah frowned, confused, while Jeremiah pondered the card. Jasmine, with her childlike curiosity, asked, "Forgive him for what, Daddy? Did he do something?" Jeremiah didn't answer immediately. He put the card in his pocket and turned his attention back to his family. Whatever motivated this, the important thing is that he showed kindness. "Let's pray for him," Mariah agreed, but couldn't ignore the strange feeling the gesture left behind. Later that night, after finishing the cookie decorations and putting Noah to bed, Jeremiah called Jasmine and Mariah to the living room. They sat around the illuminated tree with the open Bible at the center. That evening's reading was the account of Jesus' birth in Luke 2, a reminder of how faith could shine even in the darkest moments. While they prayed, Mariah's phone vibrated on the table. Hesitant to interrupt the moment, she checked the message, and her face turned serious. "Jeremiah," she said, "it's from Mrs. Carter." Mrs. Carter was one of the neighborhood's oldest residents, known for her bluntness and often harsh opinions. The message was short but direct. "We need to talk. It's urgent. Come to my gate early tomorrow. The couple exchanged glances. Although the message was unexpected, something about the past few days made Jeremiah feel that the neighborhood around them was changing in some way. He looked at Mariah, and she nodded slightly. "Let's pray about this too," she said. The next morning, as the sun shone on the fresh Christmas snow, Jeremiah put on his heavy coat and headed out, leaving Mariah to care for the children. He walked to Mrs. Carter's house, just a few homes away. As he reached the gate, she was already waiting outside, wrapped in a thick shawl. "Mr. Harper," she began, looking directly at him, "I should have spoken up earlier, but the truth is, some of us in this neighborhood haven't been fair to you. And I include myself in that." Jeremiah crossed his arms, trying to hide the discomfort he felt. "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked, keeping his voice calm. She sighed deeply, as if weighing each word before speaking. "I've heard the rumors. I know you lost your job, and I also know some people here have been making things even harder for your family. I'm sorry. You don't deserve this." "No one does." The raw honesty of her words took Jeremiah by surprise. For a moment, he considered how to respond. "Thank you for your honesty," he said finally. "But what we really want is to live in peace and be treated with respect, like any other family." Mrs. Carter nodded. "I know, and I'll do my part to ensure that happens." Jeremiah thanked her again and returned home. When he arrived, he found Mariah waiting with a warm cup of coffee and a concerned look. He recounted what had happened, and together they reflected on how their faith kept them strong in the face of challenges that seemed far greater than them. That Christmas night, as the Harper family gathered again for their dinner, a knock on the door sounded once more. This time, it was a group of neighbors carrying baskets and gifts. At the front stood Mrs. Carter, holding a Bible. "We're here to show our support and ask for forgiveness," she said, her eyes welling with tears. Mariah and Jeremiah were moved but maintained the dignity that always guided them. Jeremiah stepped forward, extended his hand to Mrs. Carter, and said, "Forgiveness is the path Jesus taught us, and for that we offer it." The Harper home, already brimming with the glow of lights and family warmth, seemed even more alive with the presence of the neighbors. The group, made up of several families from the community, filled the space with trembling voices of emotion and an energy of reconciliation. They gathered around the Christmas tree, placing baskets of fruit, toys for the children, and even a small stack of envelopes on the table. Mariah, still surprised by the sudden change in attitude, watched Jeremiah closely. He, in turn, remained calm, but his mind raced with the implications of the moment. As Jasmine played with a new teddy bear given by one of the neighbors, and Noah pointed at the twinkling lights, Jeremiah addressed the group. "This night is about the birth of Jesus, the greatest symbol of forgiveness and love the world has ever seen," he began, his voice firm yet full of emotion. "You couldn't have chosen a better moment to reach out. But true forgiveness isn't just about what we say. It's about what we do moving forward." The neighbors nodded, and Mrs. Carter stepped forward. "Mr. Harper, you're absolutely right. Many of us grew up being taught to distrust, to judge by appearances. I won't justify it, but I want to assure you that, for me and my family, this story changes here and now. I hope we can be better neighbors and God-willing friends." Mariah, sitting beside Jasmine, felt tears threatening to fall. The words of reconciliation were powerful, but she knew there would still be a long road to heal the wounds of hostile glances and whispered comments. However, at that moment, she decided to choose hope. "Thank you," Mariah said, her voice steady but moved. "We know that love is what changes hearts. We're willing to move forward, but we need you in this with us." The group agreed unanimously, and as if by collective faith, they began to sing a Christmas hymn. The gentle melody of "Silent Night" filled the home, resonating as a promise of better times to come. Later, when the neighbors had left, Mariah and Jeremiah sat alone in the living room. The children had fallen asleep, and the glow of the tree illuminated the couple's faces. Mariah leaned into Jeremiah's embrace, feeling the strength of her husband and spiritual leader. "You were incredible today," she said. "I saw in their eyes that something changed. It might not be perfect yet, but it was a start." Jeremiah smiled faintly and held her hand. I felt the same. But I also know our fight doesn't end here. We need to keep showing who we are, not by what we have or what we face, but by the way we live our faith. That night, as they finally prepared for rest, Mariah remembered the envelope left by the neighbor the night before. She retrieved it and opened it, revealing a small amount of money and a short note. I found something that belongs to you. I hope this helps ease some of the burden. God is just. Mariah showed the note to Jeremiah, who was intrigued. He took the envelope and examined it closely. The handwriting seemed familiar, but he couldn't recall where he had seen it before. They decided to save the money to help with next month's expenses, but the note lingered in Jeremiah's mind late into the night. The next day, Jeremiah received an unexpected phone call from a former co-worker. "Jeremiah, I heard the factory is rehiring. The boss spoke highly of you. I think you should give it a shot," said the friend. With a mix of surprise and relief, Jeremiah thanked him for the information. God always has a plan, he thought aloud after hanging up. He shared the news with Mariah, who immediately smiled and clasped his hands tightly. "I told you, he never abandons us," she said with conviction. The following morning, Jeremiah prepared for the interview. As he left, he stopped in front of the Christmas tree, looked at the twinkling lights, and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for never letting us give up." 2 days after Christmas, the snow began to melt, giving way to the muddy streets of the neighborhood. Jeremiah returned from the job interview at the factory with a sense of relief and hope. He had been warmly received by the manager and felt his chances were good. "It's just a matter of time," he thought as he walked home. As he approached his house, he noticed something unusual. A sleek black car was parked in front of the gate. It wasn't common to see such vehicles in the area. He quickened his pace, concerned, and found Mariah on the porch, arms crossed, with a tense expression. "Jeremiah, someone's here to talk to you," she said, trying to stay calm, but unable to hide her nervousness. Jeremiah entered the house, and sitting on the couch was a well-dressed man wearing a gray overcoat and holding a leather briefcase. He had a serious expression, but seemed amicable. The man stood as Jeremiah entered. "Mr. Harper, it's good to finally meet you. My name is Richard McAllister. I work for a law firm in the city center." He extended his hand, which Jeremiah shook, still puzzled. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. McAllister. How can I help you?" Jeremiah asked, casting a quick glance at Mariah, who was now standing near the kitchen, silently observing. Richard opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. "I represent the Peterson family," he began. "They are long-time clients of my firm. Recently, during the organization of inheritance documents, we discovered something that directly involves you and your family." Jeremiah remained silent, frowning as McAllister continued. "About 30 years ago, the Petersons owned this property. During that time, some unjust practices were used to strip black families in the area of their rights. After a thorough investigation, it was discovered that this house originally belonged to your grandparents. The documentation proving this is here." McAllister placed the envelope on the table and sat down again. Jeremiah looked at Mariah, who now approached cautiously. "Is this serious?" Jeremiah asked, trying to process what he had just heard. "Yes, Mr. Harper. It's very serious. The Peterson family wishes to correct this historical wrong. They have asked me to deliver a formal proposal of financial compensation and the guarantee that you will become the absolute owners of this house, free of any liens or mortgages." Mariah gasped softly, clutching her chest. "This is unbelievable," she said as Jeremiah flipped through the documents in the envelope. But something bothered him. Why now? Why, after all this time, have they decided to correct this? He asked. McAllister sighed. "The truth, Mr. Harper, is that part of the motivation comes from public and social pressure. The Peterson family is influential in the city and is trying to improve their reputation. But regardless of their intentions, the outcome benefits you and your family. What you decide to do from here is your choice." Jeremiah nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and skepticism. He knew this could change their lives for the better, but was also aware that accepting the deal would make them part of a larger narrative, one that might not be entirely altruistic. That night, Jeremiah and Mariah spent hours discussing what to do. Mariah, ever practical, saw the proposal as a blessing. This could give us the stability we've always dreamed of, Jeremiah. We can finally build a secure future for our children. Jeremiah, however, was torn. He knew the money was important, but couldn't ignore the fact that the compensation came with political motivations. He wanted more than stability. He wanted genuine justice. "Let's think about it," he said finally. "And above all, let's pray. God will show us the right path." As the family slept that night, Jeremiah stayed awake, flipping through the documents again. What seemed like an unexpected victory was, in reality, the beginning of a new battle. The next morning, Jeremiah decided to share the news with the local church pastor, Reverend Coleman, a wise man and a respected figure in the community. After listening attentively, the pastor said, "Jeremiah, sometimes God opens doors in unexpected ways. Don't dismiss a blessing just because it comes from an imperfect source. But don't stop fighting for the truth either. Think about what this could mean, not just for you, but for the entire community." The sun had not yet fully risen when Jeremiah left the church, carrying the pastor's words with him. Coleman had encouraged him to think beyond the immediate impact of the offer, reflecting on how his decision could influence not just his family, but the neighborhood as a whole. At home, Mariah was already awake, sipping coffee at the kitchen table as she reviewed the envelope of documents again. Her mind was torn between the relief of a possible solution to their financial struggles and doubts about the Petersons' motivations. When Jeremiah walked in, she looked at him intently. "What did the Reverend say?" she asked, sliding a cup of coffee toward him. Jeremiah sat down slowly, sighing. "He said we should consider the blessing, but not lose sight of the truth. This could be more than just an opportunity for us. It could be a chance to expose a bigger injustice." Mariah nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think we should accept the money then?" "I don't know," Jeremiah replied, furrowing his brow. "But I know we need to be careful. This can't just be about what they want, it has to be about what's right." As they pondered, Jasmine, their eldest daughter, walked into the kitchen. She had overheard part of their conversation the night before and couldn't contain her curiosity any longer. "Mom, Dad, why do those people want to give us money?" Mariah looked at Jeremiah, who decided to answer carefully. "Sometimes, Jasmine, people realize they've done something wrong and want to make it right. But it's not always that simple." Jasmine tilted her head, processing her father's words. "So, it's like when someone says sorry, but you're not sure if they really mean it." Jeremiah smiled, impressed by his daughter's clarity. "That's exactly it, Jasmine." Jasmine thought for a moment and then said something that made her parents pause. "I think if they want to apologize, they should show they're changing. Maybe you can help them do that." Jeremiah and Mariah exchanged a look. Their daughter's simple yet powerful idea resonated deeply. Over the following days, Jeremiah began to investigate more about the Peterson family and the history of injustices they had committed. He spent hours at the local library and in meetings with community leaders, uncovering that the situation was broader than he had imagined. Many other black families in the region had been similarly wronged, losing their properties and rights over the decades. Armed with this information, Jeremiah decided to call another meeting with McAllister. He asked the lawyer to return to his home, this time with representatives from the Peterson family. When McAllister arrived, accompanied by an older, elegant man who was visibly uncomfortable in the modest Harper home, Jeremiah was ready. "Mr. Peterson," Jeremiah began, looking directly at the man, "we appreciate your offer and your acknowledgement of the wrongdoing. But accepting this money alone doesn't resolve the harm your family caused to so many others, nor does it erase the history that many here have suffered." Peterson adjusted his tie, visibly nervous. "I understand your position, Mr. Harper, but we're trying to do what's right, then do more," Jeremiah replied firmly. "Use your influence to help the entire community, not just my family. This reparation can't just be about cleaning your family's name. It must be about restoring dignity and rights to everyone you've harmed." Mariah, standing beside Jeremiah, interjected with her calm but determined voice. "We want to accept your offer, but on one condition, that you invest in a community fund to help other families recover what they've lost Peterson was silent for a moment, clearly caught off guard. He looked at McAllister, who seemed equally stunned. Finally, the man responded, "I can't promise anything right now, but I'll take this proposal forward." Jeremiah nodded, but did not relent in his stance. "Justice isn't just a one-time act, Mr. Peterson. It's a commitment. We'll wait to see if your actions show that commitment." That night, Jeremiah and Mariah sat again under the soft glow of the Christmas tree lights. "Do you think they'll follow through?" Mariah asked, her voice tinged with hope and skepticism. "I don't know," Jeremiah replied, "but I know we did what was right. And with faith, I believe God will open the way." They embraced, feeling strengthened not only by the possibility of a better future, but by the certainty that they were fighting for what was just. In the days that followed, the Peterson family's response was slow and hesitant. Jeremiah and Mariah remained focused, determined not to let the matter fade. They continued to meet with community members, sharing the broader impact of the injustices and how reparations could create real change for everyone. One afternoon, while Jeremiah was meeting with local leaders, Mariah received a surprise visitor. It was Lisa Turner, the young teacher who had been helping them uncover more about the Petersons. "Mariah, do you have a moment? There's something you and Jeremiah need to know," Lisa said, carrying a folder full of documents. Mariah invited her in, and they sat in the kitchen. "I've been digging deeper into the Petersons' records," Lisa began, "and I found something that might change everything." She opened the folder to reveal records of property transactions and government subsidies. These documents show that the Petersons not only took this house, but also several other properties in the neighborhood through abusive and illegal practices. "It's not just about you. It's at least 10 other families." Mariah was stunned. "This is even bigger than we thought," she said, immediately calling Jeremiah to come home. When Jeremiah arrived and Lisa explained her findings, he felt the weight of responsibility grow heavier. "If we pursue this, it's going to be a long, hard fight," he said, "and they'll do everything they can to stop us. But we can't ignore this, Jeremiah," Mariah said, holding his hand. "If we don't fight, who else will?" Jeremiah decided to call another community meeting, this time to share what they had discovered. In the church hall, which was packed with residents, he and Lisa presented the documents, showing how the Peterson family's practices had affected not just the Harpers, but many others. "We're not here just to talk about the past," Jeremiah said, looking at the faces in the crowd. "We're here to plan for a better future. If we work together, we can demand justice not just for my family, but for all of us." The audience murmured in agreement, and Angela, the young activist, stood up again. "I'm with you. Whatever we need to do, I'll help." Even Mr. Charles, who had been skeptical, slowly nodded. "If what you're saying is true, then we've got a lot to fight for. And I've waited too long for this." Mobilizing the community in the days that followed, Jeremiah and Mariah worked tirelessly to organize the community. They created a petition demanding that the Petersons not only compensate families, but also establish a fund to rebuild the neighborhood. Lisa helped with legal aspects, while Angela and other young residents organized events to raise awareness. However, as their efforts gained momentum, resistance from the Petersons and their allies grew. One night, while Jeremiah was walking home from a meeting, he noticed a car following him. He stayed calm, but when the car sped past him and swerved dangerously close, he knew it was more than a coincidence. "Do you think it was just an accident?" Mariah asked when he told her. "No," Jeremiah said, gripping her hand, "but this only gives us more reason to keep going. They're scared because they know we're right." Threats and unity. Shortly after, the Harpers received an anonymous letter composed of cut-out newspaper clippings. It read, "Stop causing trouble, or you'll regret it." Mariah was alarmed, but Jeremiah remained calm, even as his heart raced. "This is fear speaking," he said, placing the letter on the table. "They know we're doing what's right, and that's what scares them." "What if they go beyond threats, Jeremiah?" Mariah asked, her concern evident. "We have the kids to think about." Jeremiah held her hands firmly. "I won't let anything happen to our family. God is with us, and he's never failed us. We just have to keep trusting." Jeremiah decided to share the letter with Reverend Coleman and the community. The news quickly spread, eliciting mixed reactions. While some offered support and encouragement, others questioned whether the fight was worth the risk. During a gathering at the church, a young woman named Angela stood up and spoke. "I admire what the Harpers are doing. For too long, we've accepted injustice. It's time we change that, even if it's hard." Her words were met with applause, but Mr. Charles shook his head. "Words are easy. Let's see if their actions bring results." Jeremiah wasn't discouraged. "Mr. Charles," he said, "I promise we'll do everything we can, but we can't do it alone. We need everyone here to make change real." Despite the tension, the Harpers realized they were at the center of something much larger than themselves. This wasn't just about the injustice their family faced. It was about the chance to transform the future of their entire community. A turning point as the weeks went on. Tension in the community grew. While the Harpers continued to mobilize support, resistance from the Peterson family intensified. Small acts of intimidation, hostile stares at the market, whispered comments in public meetings soon escalated. One afternoon, while Jasmine was at school, she came home unusually quiet. Mariah immediately noticed her daughter's change in demeanor. "Jasmine, is everything okay?" she asked, kneeling to meet her gaze. Jasmine hesitated, then replied, "Some kids at school were saying mean things about us. They said we're causing problems and that everyone will lose their homes because of us." Mariah felt her chest tighten. "Who said that, sweetheart?" "The Carter kids," Jasmine whispered, looking down. Mariah took a deep breath. She knew that not everyone in the neighborhood supported what the Harpers were doing. Some feared the changes that justice might bring. "Jasmine," Mariah said gently, pulling her daughter into a hug, "what we're doing is important, even if not everyone understands. Don't let their words make you doubt who you are. We're a family that believes in love, truth, and justice. Never forget that." Jasmine nodded, though her eyes still reflected worry. That evening, Jeremiah gathered the family in the living room for an important talk. "We're facing something big," he began, looking at each of them. "But we're also doing something big. If we stick together and keep trusting in God, we'll get through this." Jasmine raised her hand as if she were in school. "What if they're really mean, Daddy?" she asked. Jeremiah smiled faintly, touched by her innocence. "Even when people are mean, Jasmine, God is bigger. And he's given us courage to face anything." A critical discovery a few days later, Lisa brought more surprising news. "Jeremiah," she said, calling him immediately, "do you remember the Henderson family who lost their property years ago?" "Yes," Jeremiah replied. "What about them?" "I found something that could be crucial." Before losing their home, Mr. Henderson kept important documents proving the Petersons' illegal practices. And it seems those documents still exist. Jeremiah's curiosity was piqued. "Where are they?" "At his son Robert's house just outside town," Lisa explained. "I think we need to go there." That weekend, Jeremiah and Mariah drove to meet Robert Henderson, who lived in a rural area. When they arrived, they were greeted warmly, but with some initial hesitation. "My father always spoke about you Harpers," Robert said, serving them coffee in his small kitchen. "He said if anyone could stand up to the Petersons, it'd be you. We're trying," Jeremiah said, "and anything your father left behind could help us immensely." Robert disappeared into another room and returned with a box of old papers. "My father held on to this his whole life, hoping someone would do what he couldn't." Jeremiah and Mariah sifted through the documents, astonished by what they found: manipulated contracts, false debt declarations, and even letters outlining the tactics used to evict families from their properties. "This is it," Mariah said, holding the papers tightly. "This is what we need." On the drive back, Jeremiah clutched the box like a treasure. He knew these documents could turn the tide, but they also increased the stakes significantly. "They won't let this slide," Mariah said, glancing at him. "I know," Jeremiah replied, looking out the window. "But now we have what we need, and we won't stop." Revelations and escalation. The documents from the Henderson family proved to be a game changer. Their contents detailed decades of corruption and illegal activities tied to the Peterson family. Jeremiah and Mariah knew they had powerful evidence, but also an even greater responsibility to protect their community. They called another meeting at the church, this time inviting all affected families to see the evidence for themselves. The church was packed as Lisa presented the documents, displaying manipulated contracts and falsified records on a makeshift projector screen. Gasps and murmurs filled the room as families recognized their names and properties in the files. Angela was the first to stand up, her voice firm. "This isn't just about the Harpers anymore. It's about all of us. We need to take this public." The suggestion was met with mixed reactions. Some were eager to act, while others, like Mr. Charles, expressed hesitation. "Jeremiah," Mr. Charles said, his voice gruff, "what if this just brings more trouble? We've already seen threats and attacks. Are you ready for what comes next?" Jeremiah met his gaze, his voice steady. "I understand your fear, Mr. Charles. But if we don't act now, this injustice will never end. We're closer than ever to making real change, and we can't stop now." After a moment of silence, Mr. Charles nodded slowly. "Then let's do it. The fight goes public." Angela contacted a local journalist, Marcus Bennett, who had a reputation for covering social justice issues. When Marcus arrived at the church to meet with the Harpers and Lisa, he was visibly shocked by the depth of the evidence. "This is bigger than I imagined," Marcus said, flipping through the documents. "If we publish this, it could destroy the Peterson family's reputation. But you need to be prepared. They'll do everything in their power to discredit you." Jeremiah and Mariah nodded, fully aware of the risks. "We're ready," Jeremiah said. "This isn't just about us. It's about everyone who's been hurt." Marcus promised to run an in-depth investigative article, but warned they'd need more testimonies to strengthen the case. This prompted Mr. Charles and other affected families to come forward, sharing their stories of lost homes and livelihoods. Retaliation from the Petersons. When the story was published, the impact was immediate. The local newspaper featured the article on its front page under the headline, "Historical Injustice. Community exposes decades of abuse by the Peterson family." The article quickly spread through social media, gaining statewide attention. While many supported the Harpers and the other families, the Petersons and their allies fought back aggressively. They issued public statements denying the allegations and filed a defamation lawsuit against the Harpers. "They're trying to silence us," Jeremiah said, reading the court notice with Mariah. "But they won't succeed. The truth is on our side." Jeremiah and Mariah doubled down, with the help of Lisa, Angela, and community leaders. They held rallies and town meetings, using the momentum from the article to push for justice. An escalation of threats one night, as Jeremiah reviewed documents in their home office, a loud crash echoed outside. When he and Mariah ran to the window, they saw flames engulfing their front fence. Someone had set it on fire. Jeremiah quickly grabbed a bucket of water and managed to extinguish the flames before they spread further. Near the remains of the burned fence was a crude sign that read, "Leave now or this gets worse." The following morning, Jeremiah reported the incident to the police, but the response was dismissive. "Probably just kids messing around," the officer said. Jeremiah's frustration grew. "If something happens to my family, you'll know I warned you," he said before leaving the station. Word of the attack spread quickly through the community. In response, Angela organized a vigil outside the Harper home that night. Neighbors gathered, holding candles and singing hymns. Their presence sent a powerful message. The Harpers were not alone. A breakthrough discovery while tensions escalated. Lisa continued digging through historical records. Late one evening, she called Jeremiah, her voice urgent. "Jeremiah, I found something that could change everything. It's a government record showing that the Petersons received federal subsidies to develop the land they took from families like yours." The revelation tied the Petersons' illegal practices to public funds, making it a case of federal corruption. Armed with this new evidence, Jeremiah reached out to a sympathetic state senator who had taken interest in the case. The senator, a man who had grown up in a similar community, agreed to help bring the matter to the Department of Justice. "This is exactly the kind of case that needs national attention," the senator said during their meeting. "We'll make sure this reaches the right people, internal struggles despite the growing support. The fight was taking an emotional toll on the Harper family. One night, as Mariah tucked Noah into bed, she noticed Jasmine staring out the window, her face tense. "Can't sleep, sweetheart?" Mariah asked, sitting beside her. "I'm scared, Mama," Jasmine admitted, her voice trembling. "What if they do something worse?" Mariah's heart broke for her daughter. "I know it's scary right now," she said, wrapping her arms around Jasmine. "But we're not alone. God is with us, and so is this community. They want to protect us." Jasmine looked up at her mother, searching for reassurance. "You and Daddy are so brave," Mariah smiled, holding back tears. "And so are you, my little angel. Never forget that." A final warning: a week later, Jeremiah received a surprising call from McAllister, the Peterson family's lawyer. "Mr. Harper," McAllister said, his voice strained, "I need to meet with you. There's something you should know." Though hesitant, Jeremiah agreed. They met at a quiet cafe, where McAllister looked more fatigued than ever. "I'm here against my client's wishes," McAllister began, "but after everything I've seen, I can't keep pretending they're in the right. There are more documents, ones that could completely dismantle their hold on this community. I can help you find them, but you need to promise to protect my identity." Jeremiah stared at him, surprised but cautious. "If you're willing to do the right thing, I'll keep my word." McAllister outlined the location of an old Peterson family storage facility where the documents were supposedly hidden. Jeremiah knew this could be the breakthrough they needed, but it would also put them in even greater danger. "We need to act quickly," McAllister warned. "Once they realize you're closing in, they'll stop at nothing." The raid on the storage facility later that evening, Jeremiah shared McAllister's information with Mariah and the community leaders. The group was divided. Some were eager to act, while others were cautious about the risks involved. "This could end everything," Jeremiah said during a meeting at the church, "but it could also put us in harm's way. We need to be careful." Angela stood up, her voice filled with determination. "We've come too far to back down now. If these documents can bring justice, we have to get them." After much discussion, the group agreed to proceed, but with careful planning. Lisa and Angela volunteered to accompany Jeremiah and Mariah to the storage facility, ensuring they had support. The following night, the group drove to the isolated property McAllister had described. The storage facility was old and run down, surrounded by a chain-link fence partially covered in rust. The cold air was heavy with tension as they approached the building. Lisa scouted the perimeter while Angela stayed near the car, ready to alert them if anyone approached. Inside, Jeremiah and Mariah moved cautiously through the dimly lit space, following McAllister's instructions. Stacks of dusty boxes filled the room, some labeled with years and vague descriptions. After searching for several minutes, Mariah found a box marked with the Peterson family name. Inside were files detailing years of financial transactions, land acquisitions, and most importantly, evidence of government subsidies tied to illegal practices. "This is it," Mariah whispered, holding up a stack of documents. "We've got what we need." Before they could leave, Angela ran inside. "We've got company," she said, her voice urgent. 2 cars just pulled up outside. Jeremiah and Mariah quickly hid the documents in a backpack. As they prepared to leave, a group of men entered the building, their expressions threatening. "You think you can just walk in here and take what's ours?" one of them growled. "Drop everything and leave now, or you'll regret it." Jeremiah stepped forward, keeping his composure. "These aren't yours. They're evidence of the truth, and you know it." The men advanced, but Angela sounded the car alarm outside, creating enough distraction for Jeremiah and Mariah to slip past them. The group ran to the car, and Angela sped off, narrowly avoiding their pursuers on a winding back road. Presenting the evidence back at the church, Jeremiah and Mariah laid the documents on a table for the community to see. The papers contained irrefutable proof of the Peterson family's corruption, including records of illegal evictions and bribes to local officials. The room was silent as Lisa explained the significance of each file. Then, Reverend Coleman stood and addressed the group. "This is a defining moment for us," he said, his voice steady. We have the truth on our side. Now, it's up to us to make sure justice is served. The next day, Jeremiah and Lisa submitted the documents to both the state authorities and the journalist Marcus Bennett. The story quickly gained national attention, and calls for an investigation into the Petersons grew louder. The final confrontation, as pressure mounted, the Peterson family's defenses began to crumble. More members of the community came forward to share their experiences, and public opinion turned overwhelmingly against the powerful family. The day of the trial arrived, and the courthouse was packed with reporters, community members, and legal representatives. Jeremiah, Mariah, and their supporters sat in the front row, their presence a symbol of unity and resilience. The Petersons' lawyers tried to argue that the evidence had been obtained illegally and was therefore inadmissible. However, the judge rejected their claims, citing the overwhelming proof of systemic abuse and corruption. Jeremiah was called to the stand. Calm and composed, he recounted the struggles his family and community had faced. "This isn't just about the past," he said, his voice resonating through the courtroom. "It's about creating a future where no family has to endure what we have." After days of testimony and legal arguments, the judge delivered the verdict. The Petersons were found guilty of fraud, corruption, and violations of civil rights. They were ordered to pay millions in restitution, including the establishment of a community fund to rebuild the neighborhood and compensate affected families. A community reborn. The announcement of the verdict was met with cheers and tears of relief outside the courthouse. Jeremiah and Mariah embraced their children, feeling the weight of their struggle finally lift. The newly established community fund brought immediate changes. Homes were repaired, schools received funding, and new programs were created to support local families. The church became a hub of activity, symbolizing the unity and hope that had carried them through. At a community celebration, Angela stood on a small stage and addressed the crowd. "We did this together," she said, "and we showed that when we stand united, nothing can stop us." A Christmas of hope. The following Christmas, the Harper home was once again filled with light and warmth. As the family gathered around the tree, Jasmine placed the final ornament on a branch, her face glowing with joy. "Daddy," she said, "this year feels different." Jeremiah smiled, pulling her close. "It does, sweetheart. It feels like hope." Mariah brought a plate of cookies to the table and joined the family. "Jeremiah, why don't you read something?" she asked. Jeremiah opened the Bible to Jeremiah 29-11 and read aloud. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." The room was silent for a moment as they reflected on the journey they had endured. Finally, Jeremiah spoke. "This was never just about us. It was about showing that with faith, love, and unity, we can overcome anything." Outside, the snow fell gently, blanketing the neighborhood in peace. The Harpers' story had become a symbol of resilience and faith, a reminder that even in the face of darkness, the light of justice and hope could shine through.